Hello and welcome back to How to Start a Game Company. This is Przybylski with D20 Studios. This week we have a very interesting question from a subscriber via email. Cristian asks, do you have any tips for getting started with game development on the side while working a full-time job? And yes, I have several tips. The first thing I'd like to discuss is know what you're getting into. And I say that kind of in a deep sigh of frustration because it's a lesson that I learned particularly hard. I got started in the game industry 10 years ago, and that was my entry point. At the time, I was working full-time as a senior software engineer, directing software projects, and was very engrossed and engaged in that line of work. And there was this part of me that just thought, yeah, it'd be really fun to design games. And I started in that realm with the innocence of just designing a really simple, it was just a board game, in fact. It wasn't even a digital-based game. But it turned into something that I thought, yeah, this has got some potential. I'd like to invest more. And eventually I took the route of developing that into a digital game, and that was my first segue into programming video games. And when we think about the notion of working a side project like that, kind of the key reasons we get into that, or at least that I did, was this is something I'm not sure I'm good at. I'd like to give it a try. I don't want to invest a whole lot. I don't want to take a big risks. By doing this as a side project, I can maintain a nice income doing my full-time job, and I can kind of do this project that I'm passionate about. And it starts off innocently like that. But when you have a project like that you get really wrapped into, that ties your heart in, it slowly starts to take over your life. And that's kind of the route it did for me. When I was working on this project, I maybe started spending, just weekends, a few hours at a time, working on designs, doing programming. My first segues into the programming experience were just simple things, getting an engine up and running. I wanted to see characters on a 2D-based tile moving around in the map. And so I worked out a really simple algorithm with a 2D array and a simple recursion to get the characters moving. And then the next big milestone was getting the line of sight to work. So if I put walls on the board, the characters could either see or not see behind walls or obstacles. And that sort of kicked off the whole thing. And it was one small thing after another that sort of built this culmination of different types of projects I would take on. And what started as a simple work on the weekends was eventually becoming every time after dinner I would go and spend another couple hours on it. Eventually I was taking entire weekends, entire nights from home. And somewhere toward the peak of that, when I got really invested in the project, I would say I was investing between an additional 40 to 80 hours per week. And that was on top of the full-time job. So if you do the math on that, that comes to roughly 6-7 hours worth of time that's not spent working. You got to factor in commuting and times to eat and sleep and all that. But roughly on average, I'd say on those weeks it was probably somewhere in the ballpark of 3 to 4 hours of sleep a night at best, and very little time for anything else. And so the cautionary part of this tale, I would say, is when you think about doing work on the side, you want to really consider what it is you're trading off, right? I mean, the reason we do that is because we want to still maintain the full-time job, but there's always a balance to things, and there's going to be a sacrifice made, whether it's your money or your time. And in my case, it was several things. It was the time. I mean, I lost lots of time with loved ones, lots of family parties or gatherings with friends I could have gone to that I had to turn down or say no because I was in the middle of working on some aspect of my project. I remember one night I was working late. I had been up till, God knows, 2, 3 in the morning the night before, and my wife was pregnant with my son at the time. And I remember a coworker actually telling me that day at work, you got to be prepared for anything, man, because you never know when the moment's going to come. Like, oh, that's good advice. I'll keep that to heart. And this was 6 weeks before my son was due to be born. And my wife comes up to me and she's talking and saying, honey, I don't think I feel so good. I think something's wrong. And I said, no, everything's fine. What's for dinner? Just going about the daily schedule. I'm sitting there on my computer just cranking away. And she's like, no, I think my water broke. And, I kind of had to stop what I was doing. I wasn't prepared for this moment. I just thought, oh no, she's nuts. So we'll just get dinner going. And yeah, and I drove her to the hospital at night, and that night my son was born. And I had to be there for her, to support her, going on, 3 hours worth of sleep that day. And it was sort of an eye-opening experience that made me realize, wow, life is going to be there and go on. And, I can't be wrapped up in this project, in this side work. I'm missing important moments of my life. I'm hurting my relationships with my wife. I'm hurting myself. I mean, the time at which I was working like that, I was in this sort of zombie-like state where I would come in and I was there physically, but I wasn't there mentally. I was, in this sort of wrapped up shell of what I call the cotton candy brain, where I'm just in this, I can't think straight. My head's all clogged up with ideas about what I got to work on next to the game, and it was very, very unhealthy. So I say this all up front, not to discourage moonlighting to get your company started, because I do believe it's a good way to kind of segue in and really test and see if you've if this industry is right for you. But I say this and share this so that others don't have to repeat the mistakes that I've made. And so, kind of giving that context, I do believe there are some key lessons I learned that would help anyone who's looking on getting into this industry in that type of way to do it in a more healthy fashion. So I guess the first thing I would say would be to get yourself organized up front. Set some goals for yourself that really outline what you expect to achieve going into this project, and budget time for yourself. And budget times where you can manage both your time commitments to other things in your life, as well as your physical and your mental energy. You don't want to be saying, I'm going to work, right when I get home from work after doing a full-time job, and you're going to be using the scraps left in your brain cells at the end of the day, and it's not going to work out that way. You're not going to produce or create things the capability you would coming in with a fresh mind. I would actually encourage, start early in the day. If you want to get into this industry, get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. It's a much healthier way to get up at 4 in the morning and do a couple hours of really solid work when your mind is clear, than to burn the midnight oil, so to speak, and just take the time you have at the end of the day, because that can hurt your sleeping habits. It can hurt your energy for the rest of the next day if you're staying up late. I tended to get fixated on problems when I was coding, and that would I wouldn't stop, and I had no control of myself to stop in those moments. And so having that as a sort of a guideline, getting up in the morning, that you've got work starting in a couple hours. You have a physical way to time box yourself and keep yourself in check and under control. And the next thing you want to do is think about the goals you want to achieve. So small micro goals. There's a lot of power in getting something accomplished that results in an action in your game taking place. And what I mean by that is seeing something in the software working is what's going to fuel your energy and your excitement to go on to the next step. And it's going to give you a measurable sense of progress that's going to drive you toward moving forward in your project in a very healthy way. My starting milestones, as I said, were things like get the game engine up and running, get characters on a board moving, get attacks happening in your game, get somebody firing a laser bolt, get the turn structure completed. Whatever it is, the type of game you're building, pick and isolate a small goal that you can see in the software, because getting each of those little tiny accomplishments done is going to push you to the next milestone. And you want to kind of map those things out front so that you've got sort of a sense of where you'd like to see that progression grow. So time boxing, one small step at a time, helps drive you forward. The next key step I would say is to budget time for yourself and time to renew. One of the key mistakes I would make is that I thought spending more time on the game would result in better things happening, and it was a complete misconception of the reality of things. I had nights where I was up till 4 in the morning, and my wife would come to me and say, "Honey, why aren't you in bed with me?" And I was sitting there on my screen clicking between two shades of brown and saying, "Oh, is it, honey, do you think this is the right color or this is the right color?" And I'd be flipping back and forth. I mean, I must have sounded like a lunatic in these moments. My wife would say, "Honey, it's brown. That one, come to bed and stop thinking about it because you're not being productive. You're not leveraging your time and your energy well." And it's hard. Like I said, when you get wrapped in a passion project like that, that's sort of the crazy, nutty path that you have that can happen, and you can go down those paths. Keep yourself in check. Do things to renew your energy. One of the absolute healthiest things I did during this time, and this maybe sounds counterintuitive, was to spend time giving back to others. When you're doing something with games, and there's a passion to that passion and those learnings that you're picking up are incredibly valuable to other people. And one of the first approaches I did at this was going to a conference. It was the Flash Game Summit back in 2000. Oh man, I can't remember the year. One of their first years, 2010 maybe, that I went to this thing and met with different industry contacts and started talking to folks. It was the Adobe folks in particular that were interested in people helping to support them by writing technical articles. And again, at the time, I said I was working 80-hour weeks. The last thing you're thinking is put more time on to write an article. But let me tell you, the time it took to do that and to organize my thoughts and then give it back as a gift that other developers could then see and use in their own projects, I helped people out in that way. They got to kind of see where I struggled, spending hours of my time trying to solve a rendering problem or something. And by providing those things and giving back, it did a couple things. It helped out other people, which inherently feels good. But helping out other people is also a good way to drive your own thought process and your own energy forward. I mean, it's kind of a symbiotic, weird phenomenon of the universe that when you give back to others, it comes back in tenfold to yourself, and you feel recharged, renewed. And that energy is something that's very important in sort of maintaining your momentum and your progress going forward. And it comes back to help you in weird ways too. I said, my journey to Utah was catalyzed by writing those articles. It had nothing to do with my game itself. It had to do with the fact that I gave something back in the industry and had Adobe on my LinkedIn portfolio that got me to Utah. So you never know where things are going to take you, or what idea or contribution is going to be the thing that gets you recognized or rooted in the industry. So just be open to those opportunities and always seek to give to others, because that's going to help others and help you, so to speak. So those are my tips. I hope that that's helpful. That may not be what you expected me to say in terms of where getting started. I could go down the traditional routes of saying, download this software, but all the information you need to program and develop games is readily available. It's a matter of just sort of thinking about what you'd like to build, going out there and trying the experiments, setting goals. But really the key is to center yourself, make a plan, small wins at a time, and to constantly monitor yourself and your relationships so that you don't hurt or damage those going into this. And that's it for this week. Please, again, I encourage you to ask questions in the comments, send me an email. I'd be happy to answer your questions, share my experience, and have a great week.